your dreams.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video, and today I'm just going to be doing a quick review of Honkai Impact 3rd Part 2. By the way, if you happen to like the content, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. There are a few things that you must know about Part 2. Part 2 is not a new game. It's basically just an expansion pack for Honkai Impact 3rd. It's not a new game. It's not a new app. It's basically just an expansion pack. Basically DLC. In order to play Part 2 of Honkai Impact 3rd, you do have to reach Captain level 30. I've been told that it takes you at least an hour to get to Captain level 30. So just keep that in mind when you do plan to play for Part 2, that you do have to play a little bit of Part 1 in order to start on Part 2. You cannot also use Part 1 characters in Part 2. You can only use Part 2 characters only for Part 2, which is kind of a shame because I did wanted to use my big tittied nun wife and my snake wife in Part 2, but I cannot do that. But since Honkai Impact 3rd is a story driven game, they do give you trial characters to use, so you don't gotta worry about pulling for new characters or anything. They basically, they give you trial characters. You can, however, use Part 2 characters in Part 1 content. You can also use them in the end game content like the Abyss, the Memorial Arena, all that good stuff. Anyways, I don't want to start this review off like this, but the UI in Honkai Impact 3rd is still very shit. They didn't change anything with the UI at all. They just made it look more stylish. That's it. That's all they did. If HoYoverse wants to attract new players to Honkai Impact 3rd, especially for Part 2, I do think they need to fucking revitalize this UI. The UI is too confusing. It can scare off new players. They're not going to know where to go or what to do. I've known quite a bit of people that have stopped playing Honkai Impact 3rd because of this messy UI system. And I can't exactly blame them because it's just so convoluted and complex. They really need to fucking fix this UI. If I were to fix Honkai Impact 3rd's UI, I would kind of have it similar to Ether Gazer's UI. Just have most of that should be at the bottom with like very small like tabs. I think Valkyries and Astral OPs should be like in one tab. Obviously have the battle tab at the bottom. For some reason the gacha and shop are in one tab. I would separate both of them and just put both at the bottom. Maybe also have the dorm like at the bottom as well. That's like a very small tab. Have like your daily missions maybe either like at the top or maybe like on the left, and maybe also have like the events tab on the left. Maybe have like the settings also linked in the profile on the top left. I just don't understand why someone in HoYoverse thought that having this UI is like a good idea, because it's really not. I do think this will scare off new players. They definitely should fix the fucking UI, for God's sakes. Nevertheless, Honkai Impact 3rd is a great game, but the UI is just, oh my god, I just fucking looking at it just makes me sick. Alright, so now I'm going to be talking about the gameplay. As I said before, this is basically just an expansion, so the gameplay is generally still the same in Honkai Impact Part 2. You still got combos, you still got QTEs, you still got character switch-ins, you still got matrix dodges. Part 2 is mostly just going to consist of a story mode that's kind of open world-ish. You have some cities and towns and worlds to explore, you have enemies to fight. You have goodies to collect from either treasure chests or interacting with other stuff. You have side missions to do. You have daily missions to do. You have like domains to farm, kind of. Since Part 2 gives you trial characters, you don't have to worry about min-maxing your characters. However, in Part 2, you do have this gadget that has like a subset of other gadgets that you have to level up. So if you are struggling in a domain or through the story, you can just level up your gadgets and the sub-gadgets, which basically act as artifacts without the substats. You basically just gotta level them up and you're basically straight. These gadgets do have like some side effects during combat. Some of them unleash like fire damage, some of them will have like lightning damage, some of them will help you through traversing through hazards. You can play the game with either a mouse or a keyboard. You can play this on PC or on mobile. I think there's an iMac version for Honkai Impact 3rd as well. I typically play Honkai Impact 3rd in a controller. However, they did revitalize the keyboard and mouse controls in Part 2. Before Part 2, I think you could only play Honkai Impact 3rd with just keyboard only. There was no mouse to attack enemies with. However, in Part 2, you can attack enemies with your mouse, which is pretty cool. So now, ever since Part 2 came out, I've been playing Honkai Impact 3rd with keyboard and mouse. It's pretty cool. Although the gameplay you're seeing, you're probably still seeing me playing with a controller, but as of right now, I am playing with keyboard and mouse. I've encountered some glitches and bugs with the keyboard and mouse. Sometimes when I finish combat, the camera will like spaz out sometimes. Another glitch I encountered is with a side mission. I had a side mission that basically told me that I had to clear these hazard cores. I had to clear 2 of them. However, one of them would only spawn on the map. The second one would not spawn at all. So I couldn't finish the side quest because the second one would just not spawn. I don't know why, but it just wouldn't spawn. It's not that game breaking. It's like a quest that refreshes like every day, but you know, it's still kind of unfortunate that, you know, there are a few bugs here and there. Overall, the Honkai Impact 3rd gameplay is still overall pretty good, very flashy. If you're into action gameplay like this, then Honkai Impact 3rd is right up your alley. So next, I'm going to be talking about the story. Since Honkai Impact 3rd in general is a story-driven game, I do think it's pretty important to talk about this. If you like to play gacha games for story, I do think Honkai Impact 3rd is a pretty good option to play because you don't have to worry about min-maxing characters. They give you trial characters. So this basically means that you never really have to worry about pulling on the banner or min-maxing characters because they give you the characters to play in their story mode. So you can basically enjoy the story without worrying about min-maxing your account, because min-maxing your account is only good on the endgame content in Honkai Impact 3rd, but for the story content, you don't gotta worry about min-maxing anything. You also don't have to finish part 1 story to understand part 2. Part 2 is kind of like its own thing from part 1. It does have the terminologies from part 1, however, you don't need to finish part 1 story to understand part 2s. I might as well talk briefly about the story real quick without really spoiling anything. So basically the story is about the MC, who is a college student that studies the Sea of Data. She one day goes to her apartment, goes to sleep, and then she has a dream about a hot waifu named Sanidina. Sardines basically tells the Dream Seeker, which is the MC, basically tells her that you're the only one that can save the world. They dance for a bit, they form a covenant, and the Dream Seeker, the MC, wakes up in another room. She gets woken up by 2 six-skull operatives by the name of Helia and Coralie. For some reason, the MC has the power to enter worlds whenever she falls asleep, which is why she's probably called the Dream Seeker, which is a pretty interesting ability, but it does sound like a nuisance because whenever you take a nap, you'll end up somewhere else. Anyways, the Dream Seeker is not the only person that wakes up. Senna, or Sanidina, also wakes up as well. However, this version of Senna is the different version of what the Dream Seeker met in her dream. This Senna in real life has amnesia. Her backstory is pretty similar to March 7th in Honkai Star Rail. She doesn't really know who she is other than her name. She doesn't know where she's from. She doesn't know, where to go. So the group consisting of Dream Seeker, Sanidina, Helia, and Coralie basically set off in this strange world. They encounter a dog that has weird similar abilities to that whale in Genshin Impact, basically summoning up wormholes and going through them. This dog is summoning wormholes to summon enemies to slow us down. The group eventually corners the dog and they eventually end up in another world that worships shadows, and these shadows take fear as a currency. And then from then on, we got some world jumping shenanigans that start to begin. So the plot basically is the Dream Seeker jumps through worlds to save some world from something. We don't really know yet. The story is kind of just vague and ambiguous right now. We don't really know what we're saving the world from or why we're jumping in worlds to begin with. It is just the very beginning of the story. The story is, however, time gated. We can only play a little bit of it as of right now. More of the story will be unlocked on, ironically enough, March 7th. Despite how vague this story is so far, I do like the interactions between these characters. I think my favorite character so far is Coralie. She is very quirky. She kind of jokes around quite a bit. I like how the MC at least has personalities and goals. They interact with the characters. They interact with the world around them. They're constantly trying to get back home. And, it's really nice to see an MC that actually, does something, unlike Genshin Impact's MC. Overall, I do kind of enjoy the story. I think the story is pretty okay-ish so far. As I stated earlier, Honkai Impact 3rd is a story-driven game. If you're interested in playing a pretty unique story, then I definitely would recommend Honkai Impact 3rd. Granted, the terminology that they use in these games can be kind of hard to follow at times, so you might have to like stop, pause, and think for a moment about what the characters say, because it will sound like a bunch of techno babble at times, so you may get confused every now and then. It's kind of perfectly natural in my opinion. It is a little too early to get too invested in this story. There's not really much happening. However, I am curious to see what kind of story content we're going to be getting on March 7th, just to see how far this story can really go. The gacha in Honkai Impact 3rd is still generally the same. There is no 50-50. You basically get a guaranteed character in a certain amount of pulls. You can also pull for stigmatas, which is basically like your gear, your artifacts, and you can pull for astral OPs, which is basically like elves if you're a Honkai Impact veteran. Elves and astral OPs are kind of like, well, they're kind of like pets with like side effects. Well, elves are more like pets, but astral OPs are kind of like the characters, like the MC and that blonde chick. They basically act as like additional effects. You click on them and then they'll have like a special effect that they do. When it comes to power creep, Honkai Impact 3rd is basically the king of power creep. Part 1 characters are not going to be dealing as much damage as Part 2 characters. So basically old characters are not going to be able to compete with the newer characters, right? The newer characters are going to be dealing even more damage. Yes, Honkai Impact 3rd does give out a lot of freebies. However, there's also pretty big power creep. You can still clear all the content just fine with old Part 1 characters, but they're just not going to be dealing as much damage as, well, Part 2 characters. But since Honkai Impact 3rd is a story-driven game, you probably don't even need to touch the banner period, since the main story basically gives you trial characters to play with. Overall, I do think Honkai Impact 3rd is a pretty amazing game. I kind of took a break from it because I've been playing Star Rail. However, I might actually get back into the game again. I do think Honkai Impact 3rd is probably HoYoverse's best game. Even though I do like Genshin Impact more, I can at least admit that Honkai Impact 3rd is probably HoYoverse's best game. Has very good gameplay, better gameplay than Genshin and Star Rail, has more passion than Genshin. I think it's kind of a shame that Honkai Impact 3rd doesn't really have as much attention compared to Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. It's kind of weird that this game doesn't have a PlayStation 5 version. You would think it would have one right now, especially since on PC you can play on the controller. So I don't know why they haven't released a PS5 version for this game yet. I mean, even Star Rail has a PS5 version, Genshin has a PS5 version. If Honkai Impact 3rd had a PS5 version, I think it would get a little bit more attention that it deserves, but you know, it doesn't have it. The game is free to download since it is a mobile game, so if you want to try it out, you give it a shot real quick and see if you like it. And if you like it, you can stick around. Anyways, that's going to be the end of this video. Let me know what you guys think. Are you trying Honkai Impact 3rd Part 2? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.
Bye-bye now. Come again soon.